After my last video on the turbo hybrid era of cars, I thought I'd do another one along the same vein, but this time looking at the last naturally aspirated era of cars. That is the 2.4 V8 engine cars, which went from 2006 all the way up to 2013. So starting in 2006, I've got this Honda. This was driven by Rubens Barrichello and Jenson Button, and it was relatively successful. It was the works Honda team, so it had good backing, good budget, and it came fourth in the World Championship, so top of the midfield. Button and Barrichello stayed as the two drivers with Honda all the way through to when it switched to Brawn, which we'll come on to later. But yes, with this new set of regulations, not only did the engine change to a V8 2.4 litre, also the engineers were given quite free rein to go mad with the aero. You can see there's various wings and fins and swoops and all sorts of funky looking stuff on this era of cars, and that stayed for the next few seasons as well. Moving on to this McLaren. So this has actually got Heikki Kovalainen driving, but this is the same McLaren that Lewis Hamilton drove in 2008 to his first Drivers' World Championship. It's very similar to the 2007 car, where Hamilton and Alonso were teammates, and they both came close to the World Championship, but were pipped by Kimi Raikkonen. I really like the Vodafone McLaren livery, the silver mirror finish with the reddy orange on it. I kind of hope that the modern day McLaren does at least a special livery at somewhere like Monaco or something with this kind of colour scheme. I think that would be quite cool. Moving on to the Ferrari of 2008. Again, it was very similar to the 2007 car. This is Felipe Massa's car. I like the red on this. It's kind of a darker metallic red than the normal Ferrari red. And of course, this was the car where Massa came so close to winning his first and only World Drivers' Championship. He thought he'd won in Brazil. We all remember those scenes of looking at his dad and his brother celebrating, only to find that Hamilton swooped past Glock in the final sequence of corners to pip him to the championship by 1 point. And of course, Massa never really recovered from that disappointment. So yeah, I remember that season really clearly, and these two cars battling it out for the World Championship. In third place that year was the BMW Sauber. So this was driven by Kubica and Heidfeld. It had the full backing of BMW, had a lot of money put in, had a really powerful engine, but they just couldn't quite sort the chassis, and it just was slightly off the front runner's pace, but still a good looking car. Moving on to the Toro Rosso of 2008. The reason I've got this in my collection is I like how it looks, but obviously I've got a lot of 2008 cars already. But the reason I bought this one was because this is what Sebastian Vettel won his first Grand Prix in at the tender age of 18, I think, but very young. So yes, I wanted to kind of mark that achievement, and had the opportunity to buy this car for quite a good price. So it was added to my collection. Moving on to 2009, a change of regulations here. All the sort of fussy aero parts were banned. Everything was cleaned up, and I think this season of cars did look tidier and more elegant, maybe apart from the huge front wing that looks a bit like a vacuum cleaner. But yeah, this is the season where, of course, Brawn GP surprised the rest of the field and came out with a superbly competitive car. They had the Mercedes engine, they had the double diffuser, and yeah, Jenson Button drove this car to the World Championship. So they won both the drivers and constructors World Championship that year. So Honda had pulled out the year before. Ross Brawn, being embedded in the team, knew the potential of the car, and pulled out all the stops, pooled resources with other people, and bought the team, I think, for a nominal sum, £1 or something. But of course, there's all the wages to pay and that sort of thing. But after winning the World Championship, I'm sure when Mercedes bought it, he made a huge profit, and I believe he's a very rich man today because of it. The next car I've got, unusual car in some respects, because this never actually got any World Championship points in Formula One, but it marks Richard Branson's attempt to get into Formula One. So with his company Virgin, he poured a lot of money into Marussia, and I like the look of this car. It wasn't competitive, it wasn't quick, but it looks quite cool, and therefore I've got it in my collection. Moving on to 2011, this is the Lotus Reno in the classic gold and black Lotus livery. I think it looks really cool. It's got some red touches because I guess Total was a sponsor as well. But yeah, great to see the Lotus logo on Formula One cars again in this era. The main drivers were Petrov, Heidfeld, and of course the Senna name came back with Ayrton Senna's nephew, Bruno Senna. Sadly, he wasn't quite as quick as his uncle, but still the car was a solid midfield runner, and later in the hands of Kimi Raikkonen, it did even better. I think it perhaps got up to third in the World Championship eventually, but yeah, never a front runner. Moving on to 2012, this is the Williams FW34. The reason I've got this in my collection, it's not my favourite looking car. I think it looks okay, but it's the last Williams to ever win a Grand Prix. It certainly wasn't particularly competitive this season, and it wasn't expected to win a Grand Prix, but the stars all seemed to align for Pastor Maldonado, and he did actually win a Grand Prix in it. And since 2012, although Williams hugely successful in the 80s and 90s, it hasn't actually won a Grand Prix since, which I think is quite sad. But you know, maybe Alex Albon will change that next year. Who knows? We shall see. And of course, the era wouldn't be complete without a Red Bull. So this is the era where Red Bull really came on the scene. So they did start in 2005, so just at the end of the previous era. But of course, towards the end of this era, from 2010 to 2013, they dominated really. Sebastian Vettel won all 4 Drivers' World Championships, and this was the RB9, which saw Sebastian win his 4th championship. My main memory from this season was that multi-21 situation where Mark Webber and Sebastian Vettel had huge arguments after the race because Vettel had been given the command of multi-21, which meant hold station, don't overtake Mark. And as we all know, at this stage of his life at least, Vettel was the ruthless champion and ignored team orders, overtook Webber and won the Grand Prix. So there we have it. These are all my cars from the 2.4 V8 era. do let me know if I've got your favourite car here from that era, or if I'm missing it. If I'm missing it, let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to buy more cars, so any suggestions are gratefully received. And if you've enjoyed this video, yeah, give me a like and let me know what you'd like to see next.